So I guess I'm rolling, and just wanted to make a response video to Mark Groubert and America's Untold Stories about his research on Curtis LeMay and the surrender of Japan. I have family history with this and personal history, I guess you could say. But just wanted to say that my father, who I realized relatively recently, I think was either a soft or maybe a hard, whatever, probably a soft recruiter for the CIA. His brother was OSS George Kantrowitz, and my father was a photographer for the Tokyo war crimes trials. He wandered about, bombed out Tokyo and Yokohama after the war. He was scheduled to be with the invasionary force, probably about 1945, and always said that, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki saved his life. He didn't have much sympathy for the Japanese. And probably 10% of Japan, they're filthy animals, fascist scum, and they still need to be shot. But, overall, though, I lived in Japan for a year. I studied Japanese for 5 years. I studied Japanese history, not on a really deep level, but, one of my history professors in Fukui, Japan, back in 1990, he was a hibakusha, survivor of the atomic bombing, and a communist. Others like him, I guess, farther to the left of him, hated the emperor, used to throw rocks and full soda cans at the emperor when he paraded in Tokyo. And I think some of them firebombed the Jiminto liberals, misnamed Liberal Democratic office in Tokyo, I think it was, with a rocket launcher. Kind of like those guys. I stayed clear of, direct violence myself because I was just a scholarship student there. So there were many Japanese, probably most of them, who were amorphously, communist, socialist, pro-peace. Yes, historically speaking, during the war, there were whatever, the fanatics and the fascists were dominant. And that's an interesting detail about how the Japanese government devolved the wartime production to civilian areas, and could provide an argument for why Hiroshima and maybe even Nagasaki was bombed. But I think, as Perowitz has pointed out, has pointed out, and I think others, I remember reading about this 20 plus years ago, a fraction of the Japanese ruling class, maybe the decisive part of it, was trying to sue through peace through the Swiss, and parlaying, I believe, with the Soviets. And if there was any doubt in the minds of the majority of the Japanese ruling class, as fanatical and murderous as they were, that when the Red Army came storming through Manchuria, etc., those doubts were dispelled. And I remember this scumbag Japanese ambassador, consul, saying back in 1991 or 92, thank God the Americans got there before the Soviets did. And I was thinking to myself, well, I hope the Soviets would have arrived before and divided your country like they did with Germany, because, you're a bunch of murdering, filthy collaborators, the ruling class, and they should have shot you. And like they did with, the German scum, at least the teachers and the lawyers in, the East Germany. What else? In terms of LeMay, yeah, that's interesting that, firebombing Tokyo, and I guess you said 26 Japanese cities, Yeah, that would definitely have an effect, although I think I have read in terms of Germany that actually it stiffened the resistance, especially of the working classes. And bombing generally does not break the will of a populace. I think in the case of Japan, what broke their will was just the final capitulation and occupation. And from fanaticism and fascism, but then also the Japanese working class, they were on the cusp of, I don't know, maybe a revolution in 1947, I want to say. I knew those Japanese communists in Tokyo, you know, in passing, or you could say fairly well. I mean, I had lunch with them and went to the Roren Heiwa Kaikan, the Japanese Communist Labor Federation Peace Hall. And I was one of the first Americans they had ever seen since the American Army came in and took them off to prison for trying to lead a general strike, which Stalin had told them, basically to call off. But, at the same time, the Japanese masses were going on general strike around this time, and the emperor was not a popular figure, in 1947. And what? But, it was sort of like Germany in the sense that I guess the Japanese Communist Party had been viciously repressed by these fucking fascists. And, you would have needed a Soviet occupation of the northern half of Japan, and a regime and basically mass repression against, they would probably, a lot of them would have fled to the southern half of Japan. Unfortunately, not being shot. But, the teachers and the lawyers would have been purged like East Germany. But anyway, the Japanese Communist Party was unable to withstand Stalin and the American occupation. Very difficult situation, but still, I would say, the Japanese people had an amorphous kind of anti-imperialist ethos, consciousness, and there was a minority of Japanese who were quite militant, sort of the inverse of the kamikaze fascists. They were hardcore communist, ultra-lefts, and, they would rocket attack, the fascist or the reactionary Japanese ruling class offices, engage in combat against the military and the police, and I guess the fascists as well. So, yeah, you got to respect that. But what else? And in the case of Total War, and in comparing him with General Sherman, unfortunately, the Union did not burn down the South the way they should have, or shot, these slavers and Confederates. So, the result is, if you look around the U.S., it's run by roaches and mafia and fascists. Like in a normal country like the Soviet Union, we took those people out and we shot them, by the hundreds of thousands. And that's why I'm going back there in January, because, it's my paternal land. And I have relatives in the FSB over there. And their predecessor organization basically organized the execution of the cockroaches that thrive here in the West. But basically, yeah, it's kind of a horrible irony that the U.S. won against Japan, but then supported the fascists in Japan and, incubated them here in the U.S. in the form of Lithuanian, Ukrainian, Yugoslavian, Asian fascists, Asian counter-revolutionaries, you name it. The scum came here since the end of World War II. So, yeah, they did, I guess, break the back of, well, I wouldn't even say they broke the back of Japanese fascism. I guess maybe kind of, but it does exist as kind of a minority political current. and is, has been quite healthy since the end of World War II, doing dirty work for the CIA and the so-called, Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. What else? And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. I did meet people in Shitamachi, Tokyo, back in 1990, I guess it was, and some of them were quite, hysterical and hateful towards Westerners because, yeah, they'd basically been, burned alive. But, given what they did in China and Korea, well, I wouldn't say the workers deserved it, but, they should have taken out 10% of the Japanese and shot them. The kamikaze or the, Kempeitai or the Unit 731, the Ishis, but instead, they used them against the Soviet Union, which is, why I, don't care what these filthy murderers say about Joseph Stalin, or Mao for that matter. They were Boy Scouts. All that bullshit about them killing millions, that's all bullshit. And I won't get into that, but, the numbers are vastly inflated by basically Nazi lovers here in the West. There was bad blood, I guess one could say, among certain sectors of the Japanese population, and I guess, I don't know, I have mixed feelings. Again, probably the majority of the Japanese people were victims of Japanese fascism, but, there was that 10% who should have been shot and still should be shot. But, there's the same scum that are here in the West, the Chads and the Kyle scum, the Freikorps filth, and, the filth here, like Patton, I guess, or MacArthur, vibed very well with, the Japanese fascist filth and supported them after the war, against the communists and against the people, basically, the Japanese people, so...